One morning, at a little before 7 o'clock, I was awakened by the maid tapping at the door to announce that 2 men had come from Paddington and were waiting in the consulting room. I dressed hurriedly, for I knew by experience that railway cases were seldom trivial, and hastened downstairs. As I descended, my old ally, the guard, came out of the room and closed the door tightly behind him. "I've got him here," he whispered. "He's all right." "What is it, then?" I asked. But his manner suggested that it was some strange creature which he had caged up in my room. "It's a new patient," he whispered. "I thought I'd bring him round myself, then he couldn't slip away. There he is, all safe and sound. I must go now, Doctor. I have my duties, just the same as you." I entered my consulting room and found a gentleman seated by the table. He was quietly dressed in a suit of heather tweed. "No, not at all. Drink this." I dashed some brandy into the water, and the colour began to come back to his bloodless cheeks. "Oh, that's better," said he. "And now, Doctor, perhaps you will kindly attend to my thumb, or rather to the place where my thumb used to be." He unwound the handkerchief and held out his hand. It gave even my hardened nerves a shudder to look at it. There were 4 protruding fingers, and a horrid red spongy surface where the thumb should have been. It had been hacked or torn right out from the roots. "Good heavens!" I cried. "This is a terrible injury. It must have bled considerably." "Yes, it did. I fainted when it was done, and I think that I must have been senseless for a long time. When I came to, I found that it was still bleeding, so I tied one end of my handkerchief very tightly round the wrist and braced it up with a twig." "Oh, excellent. You should have been a surgeon." "Well, it's a question of hydraulics, you see, and came within my own province." "This has been done," said I, examining the wound, "by a very heavy and sharp instrument." "An accident, I presume?" "By no means." "What? A murderous attack?" "Very murderous indeed." "You horrify me." I sponged the wound, cleaned it, dressed it, and finally covered it over with cotton wadding and carbolized bandages. He lay back without wincing, though he bit his lip from time to time. "How is that?" I asked when I had finished. "Capital. Between your brandy and your bandage, I feel a new man. I was very weak, but I have had a good deal to go through." Holmes sat in his big armchair, with the weary, heavy-lidded expression which veiled his keen and eager nature, while I sat opposite to him, and we listened in silence to the strange story which our visitor detailed to us. "You must know," said he, "that I am an orphan and a bachelor, residing alone in lodgings in London. By profession, I am a hydraulic engineer, and have had considerable experience of my work during the 7 years that I was apprenticed to Venner and Matheson, the well-known firm of Greenwich. 2 years ago, having served my time, and I determined to start in business for myself and took professional chambers in Victoria Street. I suppose that everyone finds his first independent start in business a dreary experience. To me, it has been exceptionally so. During 2 years, I've had 3 consultations and 1 small job, and that is absolutely all that my profession has brought me. My gross takings amount to £27.10. Every day, from 9 in the morning until 4 in the afternoon, I waited in my little den, until at last my heart began to sink, and I came to believe that I should never have any practice at all. Yesterday, however, I do not think I've ever seen so thin a man. "Mr. Haselby," said he, with something of a German accent, "you have been recommended to me, Mr. Haselby, as being a man who is not only proficient in his profession, but is also discreet and capable of preserving a secret. I have a professional commission for you, but absolute secrecy is quite essential. Absolute secrecy, you understand?" If I promise to keep a secret, you may absolutely depend upon my doing so." He looked very hard at me as I spoke. He drew up his chair very close to mine and began to stare at me again, with the same questioning and thoughtful look. "How would 50 guineas for a night's work suit you?" he asked. "Most admirably. I say a night's work, but an hour's would be nearer the mark. I simply want your opinion about a hydraulic stamping machine which has got out of gear. If you show us what is wrong, we shall soon set it right ourselves. What do you think of such a commission as that?" "The work appears to be light, and the pay munificent." "Precisely so. We shall want you to come tonight by the last train." "Where to?" "To Eyford, in Berkshire. It is a little place near the borders of Oxfordshire." "Very good. I shall come down in a carriage to meet you." "There is a drive, then?" "Yes, our little place is quite out in the country. It is a good 7 miles from Eyford Station." "Well, then I can hardly get there before midnight." "I suppose there will be no chance of a train back. I shall be compelled to stop the night." "Yes, we could easily give you a shakedown." "Oh, that is very awkward. Could I not come at some more convenient hour?" "We have judged it best that you should come late. It is to recompense you for any inconvenience that we are paying you, a fee which would buy an opinion from the very heads of your profession. I should like, however, to understand a little more clearly what it is that you wish me to do." "Quite so. You are probably aware that Fuller's Earth is a valuable product and that it is only found in 1 or 2 places in England." "I have heard so." "Some little time ago I bought a small place, a very small place, within 10 miles of Reading. I was fortunate enough to discover that there was a deposit of Fuller's Earth in one of my fields. On examining it, however, I found that this deposit was a comparatively small one, and that it formed a link between 2 very much larger ones, upon the right and the left, both of them, however, in the grounds of my neighbours. These good people were absolutely ignorant that their land contained that which was quite as valuable as a gold mine. Naturally, it was to my interest to buy their land before they discovered its true value, but unfortunately I had no capital by which I could do this. I took a few of my friends into the secret, however, and they suggested that we should quietly and secretly work our own little deposit, and that in this way we should earn the money which would enable us to buy the neighboring fields. This we have now been doing for some time, and in order to help us in our operations, we erected a hydraulic press. This press, as I have already explained, has got out of order, and we wish your advice upon the subject. We guard our secret very jealously, however, and if it once became known that we had hydraulic engineers coming to our little house, it would soon arouse inquiry, and then, if the facts came out, it would be goodbye to any chance of getting these fields and carrying out our plans. That is why I have made you promise me that you will not tell a human being that you are going to Eyford tonight. I hope that I make it all plain?" "I quite follow you," said I. "I shall certainly be there." "And not a word to a soul?" He looked at me with a last long questioning gaze, and then pressing my hand in a cold, dank grasp, he hurried from the room. Well, when I came to think it all over in cold blood, I was very much astonished, as you may both think, at this sudden commission which had been entrusted to me. On the one hand, of course, I was glad, for the fee was at least tenfold what I should have asked had I set a price upon my own services, and it was possible that this order might lead to other ones. On the other hand, the face and manner of my patron had made an unpleasant impression upon me. I was the only passenger who got out there, and there was no one upon the platform save a single sleepy porter with a lantern. As I passed out through the wicket gate, however, I found my acquaintance of the morning waiting in the shadow upon the other side. Without a word, he grasped my arm and hurried me into a carriage, the door of which was standing open. He drew up the windows on either side, tapped on the woodwork, and away we went, as hard as the horse could go. "One horse?" interjected Holmes. Yes, only one." Did you observe the colour? Yes, I saw it by the side lights when I was stepping into the carriage. It was a chestnut. Tired looking or fresh? Oh, fresh and glossy. Thank you. Away we went then, and we drove for at least an hour. Colonel Lysander Stark had said that it was only 7 miles, but I should think from the rate that we seemed to go, and the time we took, that it must have been nearer 12. He sat at my side in silence all the time, and I was aware more than once when I glanced in his direction that he was looking at me with great intensity. The country roads seemed to be not very good in that part of the world, for we lurched and jolted terribly. I tried to look out of the windows to see something of where we were, but they were made of frosted glass, and I could make out nothing save an occasional blur of a passing light. Now and then I hazarded some remark to break the monotony of the journey, but the Colonel answered only in monosyllables, and the conversation soon flagged. At last, however, the bumping of the road was exchanged for the crisp smoothness of a gravel drive, and the carriage came to a stand. Colonel Lysander Stark sprang out, and, as I followed after him, pulled me swiftly into a porch which gaped in front of us. We stepped, as it were, right out of the carriage and into the hall. The instant that I had crossed the threshold, the door slammed heavily behind us, and I heard faintly the rattle of the wheels as the carriage drove away. It was pitch dark inside the house, and the Colonel fumbled about looking for matches, and muttering under his breath. Suddenly a door opened at the other end of the passage, and a long golden bar of light shot out in our direction. Colonel Stark laid down the lamp on the top of a harmonium beside the door. "I shall not keep you waiting an instant," said he, and vanished into the darkness. I glanced at the books upon the table, and in spite of my ignorance of German, I could see that 2 of them were treatises on science, the others being volumes of poetry. Then I walked across to the window, hoping that I might catch some glimpse of the countryside, but an oak shutter, heavily barred, was folded across it. It was a wonderfully silent house. There was an old clock ticking loudly somewhere in the passage, but otherwise everything was deadly still, and a short, thick man with a chinchilla beard growing out of the creases of his double chin, who was introduced to me as Mr. Ferguson. "This is my secretary and manager." He shot one of his suspicious glances at me. "Perhaps we had better proceed to business then," said he. "Mr. Ferguson and I will take you up to see the machine." "I'd better put my hat on, I suppose." "Oh, no, it is in the house." "What? Do you dig Fuller's earth in the house?" No, this is only where we compress it. But never mind that. All we wish you to do is to examine the machine, and to let us know what is wrong with it." The Stark stopped at last before a low door which he unlocked. Within was a small square room, in which the 3 of us could hardly get at one time. Ferguson remained outside, and the Colonel ushered me in. "We are now," said he, "actually within the hydraulic press, and it would be a particularly unpleasant thing for us if anyone were to turn it on. The ceiling of this small chamber is really the end of the descending piston, and it comes down with the force of many tons upon this metal floor. The machine goes readily enough, but there is some stiffness in the working of it, and it has lost a little of its force." I took the lamp from him, and I examined the machine very thoroughly. It was indeed a gigantic one, and capable of exercising enormous pressure. When I passed outside, however, and pressed down the levers which controlled it, I knew at once by the whooshing sound that there was a slight leakage, which allowed a regurgitation of water through one of the side cylinders. An examination showed that one of the India rubber bands which was round the head of a driving rod had shrunk, so as not quite to fill the socket along which it worked. This was clearly the cause of the loss of power, and I pointed it out to my companions, who followed my remarks very carefully and asked several practical questions as to how they should proceed to set it right. When I had made it clear to them, I returned to the main chamber of the machine, and took a good look at it to satisfy my own curiosity, but stooped when I heard a muttered exclamation in German, and saw the cadaverous face of the Colonel looking down at me. "What are you doing there?" he asked.